launch. I was really excited for this book from the moment I saw the cover. I knew that it was going to be something that I needed. I have made it my 2024 resolution to read books like this a month, every month. And I say books like this, and let me expand on that. Books that are just fun and warms the heart and makes you miss Durban, makes you love being a South African, and only you could know, us in this room know what, Zohar Namaz is, and, the pearls in Amshlanga, and all of this nostalgic feelings that this book has evoked in me. So, just to start off by saying, Shahinaaz, that I was very excited for the launch of this book. And having read it and preparing for this evening, I was extremely pleased that my anticipation was well placed. It is a fun, warm, cuddly read. Do I have it right?
I didn't expect the cuddly part, so I'm very happy for that. Thank you. I was a little apprehensive. When a new book comes out, it's very exciting, and you get used to, the hype that goes with it. But I'm usually very thematic in my considerations, and this was different. And I was sort of like, I don't know how this is going to be taken. It can almost be seen as chick lit. And perhaps it is. The warm and cuddly goes with the flow. But I also really wanted to celebrate Durban, and I put the characterization of Durban comes through because of my love for a space that I've visited so often. So to have a darling of Durban sitting right next to me on the platform is fantastic. And I think that having you read it is also not just from the critical eye, but from the social eye to say, did you feel that there was this authentication of the city? And if you got that feeling, then I'm happy to take that as a review.
Shahinaaz, I have read and tracked your work for about 15 years now, and you have been a very big inspiration for myself, for many aspiring writers, particularly because you showed us what's possible, but also you didn't box yourself. You've written short stories, you've written young adult fiction, you've written what I would think now is chick lit. And so that for me, that sort of varying melting pot of what you offer us as readers is inspiring. Why this direction? Let's talk about Darlings of Durban. Why this sort of change in direction, if you like, and a little bit away from your last few books, which were very frenetic and very a little bit more serious, if you like.
I think, if I just look at my journey as a writer and where it started, and the consideration was always about bringing Daughters Are Diamonds and the research from Daughters Are Diamonds, my social science research, into the space to engage more of a conversation. And I thought that fiction would be an interesting way to do that. And so in the beginning it was about short stories that we launched the Belly of Fire Anthologies for Social Change series, and I encouraged more of these stories because we were able to derive conversations, circles of social change through these conversations, and that was what I thought I was adding to. I've written about GBV, I've written about human trafficking. When it came to Darlings of Durban, it was purely about exploring character. It's the first time I've just purely written character. Be it in the form of Durban and the 4 women that are featured, and incidentally the male characters in their lives, relationships and that sort of thing. And so the focus was different, the approach was different, and the feel was different. I had a lot of fun writing this book. Darlings of Durban really brought out a different side of me, the writer. It allowed me to explore a far more creative bent than perhaps the sort of boxed-in approach that I might have had before. And not to take away from previous works, a lot goes into the writing, but I know that I can appreciate the structural process, the leap that sort of happened. And so with Darlings, I know that I enjoyed building on these characters, getting to know my characters, feeling their experience of being in Durban, what it meant to them as a city, what it meant to me as a city, definitely came through in the writing, in the exploration of the essence and the flavors of the city. And I think that was what made the difference.
So let's talk about the friendships that this book tracks. It's 4 friends, Natasha, Sophia, Farhana, and Razia. Each character is very different, very unique, and their story is all culminating in different ways. Why was it so important to premise this book around a friendship circle? Of all the ways to frame a story around a city, why anchor it around the lives of 4 intertwined friends?
I found in my own life one of the most fundamental themes in my life, perhaps, something that I'm deeply grateful for, is the notion of sisterhood. It's the notion of sisterhood that brings you sitting here beside me and so many of these lovely faces in front of me. And I celebrate that, and I wanted to write that into the story. And there's no way, it's not without any doubt that these sisters bring something out of each other by, the way that they share, the way that they celebrate, commiserate, and enjoy each other. And those relationships are quite formative for our lives, quite significant in our lives. So not just socially, not just within our private spaces, but in the public space as well. Women's groups, organizations, and communities, the mothers' groups are holding us up in society. So I wanted that to come through in these, in these stories, the way that they share, the stereotypes that are held and smashed from within these relationships, and the engagement that happens, the traumas that get dealt with, and the real joys and delight that come from being part of a system.
And I think generally in literature, but also in society, we often overplay romantic relationships as sort of the only form of intimate space. But girl-lady friendships, woman friendships, hold a lot of space for people, and we see that reflected in the book. There's as I was driving, I thought about this, and I said, a lot of your characters, all 4 of them, are strong characters. Was that intentional in any way?
I think it reflects, I'm not so sure if they're all strong characters personally, but I think it reflects my view of the women I've encountered in my life. It's not that these women are about anyone in particular, but my overall view of the women I've met, of women who run their households or businesses, women who uphold society, women do hold up half the sky. And I think that would have come through in my characterization, in feeling these characters and developing and getting to know these characters.
And a little bit unapologetic in the characterization of Natasha, for example. Very strong, bold businesswoman. It's sort of unassumed, it's uncontested. She's a strong woman.
And she's also, in her space, contesting this idea of identity, because she comes from a mixed race household, and then she's brought up in exile, and she comes home not feeling either Zulu enough or Indian enough or South African enough. And yet she finds her space, and she says it helps her to distance herself from the fakeness of her social or familiar relationships. She's able to engage with at a distance in kind of a detached way. So it's interesting how that interplays and comes through in her romantic relationships as well.
So we'll get to her romantic relationships, it's very spicy. but let's talk about the race thing, because I found it fascinating how it's mentioned, but it's not the center of the plot. That it's sort of an afterthought, whereas a lot of interrace romantic literature often sort of dramatizes that element. It's very flippant, and I like the way you did it. It's part of an identity, it's part of who she is, but it's not all of her. And it's not agonized over that she has a black mother and an Indian father who happens to be a politician. It's just the story as no different to Farhana's parents or Joe's parents, if you like. And so I love that about the book, because I felt like that is just truly South African. We can sit in a room and just everyone has this fascinating, interesting story, and it's fine.
It is. I mean, the story is a very essential South African story. And there are no boundaries in our thinking. I mean, even if you take it to this conceptualization of what it means to find a soulmate, is your soulmate supposed to look and smell and sound like you?
Yeah.
What are your boundaries in terms of that? Why are there those boundaries? So South Africa is beautiful in the sense that we celebrate ourselves in every hue and every form, and hopefully we're finding our soulmates in that space. And I think I wanted these characters to reflect what I was observing and experiencing within this broad landscape, this multicultural landscape that we live in. That sense had to come through, and I think it does in obviously in my previous works as well, but specifically Natasha's story was this melting pot of everything that's happening in the world. She's a woman of the world, she makes choices for herself, she's unapologetic about how she lives her life, and she questions tying herself down to a marriage contract, for example, and that comes through as the big what if in the story. What if you could conceptualize exactly how you wanted your relationships to look, not just based on social expectation and what's required of us as women in society specifically.
I want you to just talk about the age of the characters, because just to sort of frame their life story. These are not young adults, right? What was the thinking in telling the story of middle-aged women, and to do it in such a fun and sort of in a way that doesn't make everything, I don't know how to say it in a very nice way, but to not make it miserable.
That's precisely it. As a middle-aged woman writing, I want people out there to know we're having fun, and it's not just the young people out there having fun. We still remember how to have fun, but also the WhatsApp group, right? So especially through COVID, those coffee shop gatherings or book club gatherings and even the custom and spiritual gatherings have all been brought into the social media space in the form of WhatsApp groups. So the darlings have a WhatsApp group. Yes, they all get together and chat, but they even say that when coming through COVID, they haven't had a chance to get together. They're really looking forward to meeting up in Durban. But the darlings WhatsApp group is really where the conversations happen, because you can find your friend awake at like 2 in the morning if you have something urgent, the crisis is happening, or you can celebrate something that's happened, or commiserate over relationship issues or in-laws issues or whatever has come up for that time. And they find a way to strengthen each other, to support each other. And we all have some kind of a story where we can rely on friendships like that. Beyond the school mom groups and the family groups where you kind of sterile engagement. This was the unfiltered conversations that happen on these sisterhood groups.
So I'm going to read a little bit that I love, because it made me reminiscent of my sister group. So Natasha says, "Hi sisters, who's awake? What everyone's doing?" Razia, "Hi Tasha, not much. What's happening with you? You're up late." Farhana, "Salams, I'm awake. What's up?" Natasha, "C3 is ghosting. Can you believe?" Farhana, "Men, what can I say?" Natasha, "Yeah, ish tantrums, nah?" Farhana, "It's easier to handle ghosting if you don't live with them. Imagine a man giving you silent treatment when he's in your home. Ask me, I know all about it." I'm going to continue, but I just absolutely love this, because all of us can relate to these WhatsApp groups. Hello, how's it? Everybody awake? Like, what's up? And what can I take for a runny tummy? Or it could be anybody awake? Like, look at this cake that I baked. It's a range of things, and I love that about the book. And these relationships navigate. This friendship group navigates serious things about really, really serious relationship existential problems, issues around family, issues around finance and money, and we'll get to that. That's a very important one that I wanted to talk about. And it just shows the kind of canvas that life is, and the manifestation of what that looks like in friendships. That for me was very beautiful. But let's talk about the fun bit, the romantic relationships. I have some questions. So let's talk about Natasha Nana. Natasha Nana, like we mentioned, she is a successful business owner. and she has two love interests. First, she has a love interest. Oopsie! I thought it was being a bit. Okay, so let me reverse. Natasha Nana has a love life, but talk to me about how you navigated her story. I found that you wrote about her with no judgment, and you took us into her life as if we were two her best friends. And it really was a wholesome experience from where the book starts until the end of the book. Talk to us a little bit about that character and her romantic relationships.
So Natasha was important for me while exploring her character and this conceptualization of I don't want to be stuck in a birdcage all my life when she's speaking to Sophia. Even though she's in a relationship with a man who wants to commit, who wants to be married, who wants to start a family, she's having these, she's indecisive about it. She's still trying to figure out what this relationship would mean to her, and everything's fine the way it is. And obviously her best friend's giving her advice that this is, the next thing to do, the best thing to do. Against the married friends, I wanted to explore Natasha's not just it's not really indecision, but her skepticism about a committed relationship and whether it would carry through in the way that she envisaged, and whether it would mean loss of independence, which she talks about, being a bird in a gilded cage. And all of that draws out in the conversations that she has, especially with Sophia, who has this perfect life, and she's running her home, and she gets along well with her in-laws, she's got these beautiful children. And
let's talk about Sophia and Shazad. I found them the most functional.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, but I loved how her character didn't come across as judgy to the other characters, even though it seems like she has her life in order.
And she does, because she's trying to give everyone advice, and yet she's not without some amount of lament. She sometimes thinks about the dreams that she set aside in order to make this life work, but she does it without a sense of bitterness. She's happy to do what she needs to do to keep her life together, to bring the children up. And she really enjoys this bevy of women, it's the sisterhood that she engages in. So she's got a kind of a contented attitude towards life. Quite opposite to Farhana, who's constantly complaining about everything that happens.
She's messy, that one. Messy.
The hot mess that she is. And she's just as important as a character because we all have our hot mess moments, It's just how much does she engage? Is she a bit of a martyr in a relationship, one could ask? Or does she allow herself to be, does she allow decisions to be made for her that question her own value system? Does she question her own value system? One wonders, because she starts to make decisions that put her friendships at risk.
And I mean, the one part of the book that sort of, makes you slow down a little bit, I think, is the difficult relationships, the divorce element that comes into the storyline. And we won't give too much away because, like I said, I'm just going to spill everything and tell you how it ends. You will know you can buy the book. So talk to me about, while that juxtaposition between kind of marital bliss or a functional relationship in one character, but this kind of falling apart of a relationship in another, and how this friend group navigates both sides of it.
In many ways, as much as the sisters rely on each other, there's some aspects of their relationships that they can't speak about. And I almost feel like sometimes in our relationships there's this need to glorify our presentation of how we are and how we come across in society. And so, even in Razia's case, she has a very complex relationship with Joe. But she's careful about what she says to the sisters. As much as there's a lot of sharing, she's careful about how much she reveals until she's comfortable enough to make the decisions that she makes. And it's a volatile space. You see in the conversations that happen, I sometimes read, I've been reading page 27 out of the book to give a sense of that relationship, where there's, he humiliates her in a one situation. And she takes it in a stride. She's a professional, she handles the situation. But she's never said that to the sisters. So when we navigate these different relationships and the complexities within them, we're also choosing what we allow to happen. And at the same time, we're deciding what our boundaries are within those spaces and how much we're willing to accept. And it's only at a certain point that she has to make this decision of whether she must continue or not. And what I wanted to do with these characters and this book is, as much as this is an entertaining read, inevitably there must be some occasion for reflection, some thought to say, well, if I was in this situation, or if I know someone close to me who's in this situation, because we do form interventions, whether we realize it or not, for each other within our family and community spaces. If I am found to be trapped in this situation, what kind of solutions would I discover and find? And these are not always going to be engaged professionally. I think we all have the opportunity to intervene in our own spaces, in the decisions we make, and in those around us, in our loved ones' spaces. And this is where sisterhood comes in. How do we?
And what I love about this book is that as you read the different stories together, and I found that fascinating, because I don't think I've seen that in your writing in the way that it's presented in this book. Kind of, seen from this character's life and a scene from that character's life as they move in time. I found that to be fascinating, because you sort of jumping between Durban and here and there. I must say though that there are some elements of the book that I found were a little rushed through, and I say that in terms of the in understanding the going from a fracture to a breaking point in one relationship, or going from meeting to commitment. And I don't know if that's a function of having to navigate many characters, or is it just to keep the book light and punchy?
I think there was an element of raciness. The pacing was there, and that when you're reading and there's almost this jarring incident that happens in a relationship, sometimes that happens in real life, where you just don't see it coming and it hits you in the face. You wouldn't. So as much as I wanted to explain the process, and maybe some of it can be fleshed out, when you look at the editorial process, wanting to put those characters in the space of the book, but also keeping the pacing in a way that engages your audience to a quick read, as this was. I think we tend to interplay with that, but I take your point. Because, how much is too much when you're revealing the story, and where can you insert some amount of maybe mystery, and also let the reader feel that jarring nature of a broken relationship happening just like that suddenly. Like some people will say, I didn't see, sometimes a person in a relationship will say, I didn't see this coming. And then you have time to reflect and expand and process however this might happen.
So is Dialects of Durban a love story?
Dialects of Durban is an amalgamation of love stories, especially my love of Durban. And I found that when I was writing the book started off with me writing it in Durban. I spent about 5 weeks there. I even extended my stay. And you start to feel reclaim the streets, taste the tastes and smell the smells of a city. You see things differently. You really listen to how people choose their words. Perhaps even try to sound a bit. I think we sometimes assimilate intonations when we're with people. And you have a different sense of the city from that point. I also celebrate a city like Durban as my creative space, because in Joburg I have routine and I'm just part of the machinery of the city. Whereas when I'm in Durban, I can step back and really enjoy it. My grandmother is there, so I really appreciate being in her presence. So it's a very spiritual experience for me as well. And that's what I wanted to celebrate through the book as well.
And what I loved, there's nothing more Durban than the wedding scene. This is Durban. The nuggets of elements of crime in the city, the nuggets of family and in-law dynamics, the characterizations of areas like Asherville versus Mhlanga, for example. It really gives you, even if you're not from Durban, it gives you a sense of familiarity with this place. So when you're done with the book, it's like you've had a visit to Durban and you've really just engaged with, like the city in the most soulful way. And that's what I loved about it. So, Sheminaz, there's a few things that I wanted to explore with you. There was a theme that I found quite fascinating, and that is the very tentative, touchy issue of money and how it plays a role adversely in friendships and in relationships, but also as a metaphor for social structures and social class. Why was that important? Why was that something? It's not a focus of the book in any way, but I thought that was fascinating.
I think the way we pay attention to how money is involved in our lives, whether we're how it fits into our lives and how we engage in our relationships. And what happens in this particular instance is I try to unpack some of the stereotypes through the stories about what people feel about somebody who Mike Farhana's husband called Sophia's husband, a snooty like Shazad Big Bucks, and he makes a comment about that. But he wants some kind of a loan. He's trying to get his wife to get a loan from him. And so these conversations that happen around how people visualize and judge based on financial status. And these come through in our conversations sometimes subtly, sometimes we don't even realize it. And on the other hand, there's this expectation, there's almost this feeling of entitlement sometimes between close friendships, where we feel we can reach out in certain ways, but we're not always accountable for reaching out and how much we can actually give back, or whether there's a sense that Sophia has a lot of accountability for how much she spends, but a friend feels, she won't miss a certain amount of money because she's got so much. So those stereotypes come through, even though these are close friendships and close relationships. Everyone's aware of where they stand on this kind of social scale and how much they can expect from each other, and whether there's a sense of responsibility towards those reliances. Taking advantage of sensitivities and sensibilities around friendship, and whether that is really, it brings to question, right? Are we doing that in our lives, and whether those kinds of things come to the fore.
We're going to open up for questions in a little bit, so get your questions ready. I think we can have a fantastic conversation with Shafinaza. We can sit here for another 3.5 hours. But I just want to read something, just a few sentences that really stand out for me. The peaceful early morning breeze awakened her senses. Razia sipped her orange tea and contemplated her last day in the city she still considered home. The sun rose over Durban like one left to watch over a naughty toddler who seemed angelic in their sleep but could get up to no good. In Joburg, it was different. Sun and moon were keen-eyed sentinels, pouring light into dark spaces wherever possible. But here, it was a steady pouring of liquid gold into the city, along the beaches and through the suburbs and the valleys and villages. That's so beautiful.
I'm so glad you enjoyed that. A little bit of poetry inspired by being in Durban.
Imagine. So, a few things that I wanted to just wrap up this conversation before we open it up to the floor. What do you think, or what would you want to be the foremost thing that stays with the reader when they're done reading this book?
I think definitely a sense of how important sisterhood is and how important it is to cultivate our relationships. We don't succeed or live life in isolation. And when we're able to appreciate and celebrate each other, I think that's what makes more of life. So I think that would be the main thing. And the men are not necessarily incidental. I don't think this book is just about women. I think that the relationships they have with the men in their lives is also quite significant and something of a take point for readers.
So I put this book down and I still stand by it. Darlings of Durban is the perfect flight read. Thrilling but not heavy, light but not fluff. And I stand by it. It's getting the perfect 2-hour flight to Cape Town book. It's a science to it, and I think add this to your collection. So let's open up to some questions, shall we? To continue the conversation, and then we can take it further. The books are on sale, right? So, and Shafinas will be signing books, so I think that will be a good opportunity for you to buy this book, gift this book to your loved ones. I see you have 2 books there, following his footsteps. Buy books for your loved ones. Sure. Shall we just have like a round of 3 and then we'll come back for answers? Do you want to just raise by show of hands? 1, the gentleman there, the lady in the scarf in front, 1 more, and
Hi, Shafnas. Quick question. You mentioned money, a big issue about in the book. Now, at the moment, of course, the Durban economy is not in a very good state. In fact, the whole economy, because even the town, is not in a very good state. So I found myself wondering, in terms of the book, whether how the characters relate or interact with the social economic environment that they're living in, and to what degree that environment, those conditions impact on, not just on their livelihoods, but on their relationships, not just in terms of romantic relationships, but relationships within the family. And there's some people that feel that, that one socio-economic environment doesn't have any impact on your personal relationships, just on your pocket. Whereas others feel it plays a very big role. Do the characters interact, relate to that in any way? Is there any impact?
Thank you for that question, Gary. And absolutely yes, I think that one's socioeconomic status would have impact on how life is formulated and the relationships around them. And what I forgot to mention earlier is that aside from Natasha, Razia, Farhana and Sophia were in high school together, so they're also sentimental about their friendships from school. And now as middle-aged women, they probably reflect on their different lifestyles. Razia is a self-earning professional, Sophia is married in an affluent family and managing her household in a very efficient way. And Farhana is managing her household as well, but she's very aware of the kind of challenges that come with some of the restrictions within the space. Her husband runs a chess organization and she runs a charity organization. She's got young adult children. So she navigates those possibilities and she does have some degree of disappointment with the way life is done. And I think based on the closeness of his relationships, there's a kind of, there are comparisons being made. And in a moment of, I wouldn't say desperation, it's more than her husband puts her under pressure, to kind of get a loan from a friend because he feels somewhat like it would be an easy thing. And it puts her relationships under pressure. It's not something that she needed to bring into her life, but it does bring her to question her own value system because she's trying to keep everyone happy in the space and she's created quite a quagmire for herself. So this is what comes into play in this particular relationship setting. It's not primary to the overall telling of the story, but it does come out in that particular interaction.
Hi, Shafinas, Konita. I'm also from Durban, so really looking forward, originally, Durban's my hometown. Really looking forward to reading this, and I've been trying not to read any of the reviews thus far, because I want to come to it clean. But many of the themes that you've elucidated today, Juanita, and that you've responded to Shafina's, make me think that about the sisterhood groups that all of us are part of, and that in fact, particularly during COVID, became a placeholder for the in-person meetings that we couldn't have then. And in fact, Shafinaz and I have been on a couple of them together, and one in particular comes to mind. I'm pretty sure you know which one I mean, Shafinaz. So to what extent did these real-life sisterhood groups, particularly in the virtual space, contribute to your writing this book and influence the characters in this book? Because it certainly seems to me, just from listening to you two tonight, that there is a fairly strong influence there.
I think that, from the sisterhood groups that I've been in, the smaller and the larger groups, there's definitely a sense of support, camaraderie, commiseration, like I said, and a feel that you create a safe space around which you can support each other, interact with each other, and you learn from each other. And I think sometimes women are within that space profiled for, being either very available in certain ways, very amenable in certain ways, because your personality shows through. And in any group dynamic, virtual or not, you start to see these interactions happen in such a way that some of the friends might be at a disadvantage and some not. So I think I learned that through sisterhood groups, and I wanted to capture that experience, because I think it's important. I think that many people who have been in groups, again, in the virtual space or not, would have experienced these dynamics. It happens in a classroom setting, it happens in a workspace, it happens in family relationships, and it happens around the supper table as well. So what I really wanted to sort of impress upon was that these, as much as you need to be a responsible user in these interactive spaces, sometimes you need to guard yourself from being taken advantage of. And that was the big sort of takeaway from my experiences on those groups and what I wanted to convey through these stories.
I'm a huge fan of Shafina's, and I've read all her books, and I always admire and love the fact that there's these stories that relate to us. The representation is amazing from listening to Sela and everything else. But I recognize the name of this name, Sophia, and I wanted to know if there's a correlation to my favorite book.
I've been asked this question at almost every launch, so thank you, Akira, and it's so lovely to see you here. I wrote the book Sophia in 2012, and it was based on, it was a book that covers domestic violence, but that was SOPHIA, with the PIHI referring to the golden efficient, and this idea of, the golden efficient, and it was the house, the name of a house. I think Ibrahim Fakir also asked me if there was a connection to the book. I don't know if he's still here. But so somehow I just knew that eventually I would write. No, I didn't. I didn't know that Sophia would have a link. This one's spelled SOFIA, and she just felt like, the way when a baby's born, it just has a name. I think these characters name themselves. So there isn't a correlation, but I'm finding people drawing these links anyway.
We'll take 3 more questions. So, the lady here, the lady in the back, one more, and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paris. Yes, I'm looking forward to reading this book. I haven't read any of the books, but I know that I've been following you on Facebook. What I want to find out about this system, interestingly, I'm watching a series right now with 4 girls, sisters, and I'm getting a bit annoyed with the fact that they are so much into each other's space. So what happens is they want to know about everything that each each one of them is doing. And I find that they're not giving each other space, and they also don't trust that the other one is giving their all. And I heard you said, you know, in a relationship also there are boundaries. You can go up to a certain point in giving your information. How do you, just for the young people that are here, how do they navigate and knowing that this is how much I can say, even though she's my best friend or my sister? Because the minute they find out that you did not tell them about whatever the juicy story, I guess then you begin to have a mistrust in the relationship. How do you navigate? How do you really go about not giving your all, but still being in the system? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Mrs. Mashaba. I mean, I think that when we navigate relationships, especially with our sisters, it starts off earlier, whether we're with our own family members, our own siblings, cousins, those are our first friends, and then friends at school and high school. Already you have these interactions where if you want to be a part of a group, you have to interact in certain ways and you have to give of yourself in certain ways. And we take some of that learnings into adulthood, into our sisterhood relationships. And I think it comes down to how much do we want to be accepted, and what does self-acceptance first mean before we put ourselves out there in our relationships. Because without a doubt, there are going to be this group dynamic and relationship dynamic I spoke about. There are going to be situations where you can be taken advantage of, even in your closest of spaces. And so that self-acceptance allows some self-guidance to say, well, this is how much I'm feeling safe enough to share. And if that person doesn't understand the boundary, then that's exactly why I needed that boundary in the first place. And this is something that takes a long time to learn. I can say it now, sitting here as a 40-something-year-old woman, and I would not have been able to tell you that 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. So I think that we learn that over time, that how much safety and comfort you feel within those spaces in terms of sharing is something that you decide for yourself. Nobody else can decide it for you, even in your intimate relationships. And this is something that I think that we need to speak more about. It's not pleasing to be pleasing all the time. You know, sometimes we don't come here to be liked. We don't come here to be completely adverse all the time. It's not, it's not necessary to be acceptable all the time. And sometimes somebody has to deal with a disappointment. That's part of life. This is the attitude I take, without wanting to deliberately stab or poke or step on toes, but just to say I'm comfortable with this, and I'm also comfortable with disappointing people sometimes.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Shafinas. So I'm halfway through the book, by the way, and I'm really enjoying it, so I'll send you my review. I know you've got loads of great reviews already. So I'm really impressed by the characters. I'm really enjoying the characters, and I just wanted to ask you: did they behave when you were writing it, or did they want to go off on their own jaws? Because I know how strong characters are. They'll do their own thing, much as you wanted them to maybe follow your plot outline or your characterization of them. Did they behave, or did they do their own thing?
I can say for certain that Natasha's character was like riding a horse, not even into the sunset. There's so many ways her character could have gone. And there is a point where you have to rein in your characters and decide that this is, sort of the point it can go to in order to resolve the character. And I think she does come into her own in many ways as the story progresses and the opportunities that she's presented with. And that was part of the story. The other characters, not so much so. I think that there was some distinction in how they worked out. And from an editing perspective, and I'm very grateful for working with a really good editor on this, who gave me that grounding. I think Fernanda's character was the most interesting to resolve. I think that took us more time to resolve because of the complexity of her thinking. She looks like a simple character at the outset, but the complexity was that she's swayed by wanting to please her husband and his expectations of her, and wanting to remain a part of the sisterhood. And there's a point where she does have to make a decision because she's swaying between these two and she's not really sure. And she has to come into herself. I mean, as is not a young woman. She's got to finally make a decision on what makes sense to her. So for me, in the writing phase, that was a character I really needed to flesh out before we were able to rein her back in the editing phase. And as a writer, I think you'll understand now how that process can be, because you can be so precious about writing your characters and you want everything to be out there. And then you really have to choose how to shape and prune this rose bush, so to speak, until it's ready for publication.
I'm a bit surprised that you can write about Durban, which is apparently a city falling apart, and that it doesn't impact on the people in your book. Durban is noted for being terrible in many ways. So you bring it into your book. You bring the bad parts of Durban into your book, so that it gives you a more realistic notion of the things that people in Durban must be very worried about, rather than just this idyllic life that you project.
Thank you for that very important question. As much as I'm celebrating Durban, I do give a sense through the characters and how they view the space of the dilapidation of certain areas. And so there's one incident where Razia and her husband, they leave the airport and they notice Umhlanga and then the slow decay as they move towards Overport and Asherville. And so I give a bit of a description, but it doesn't come into play in their everyday lives. I do speak about Natasha being a victim of crime twice, in different ways. Once outside her workplace and once when her attacker, enters her house or her home. So I bring in some of that. But there's a lot that can be written about Durban. I mean, the way in which the construction industry has been impacted. The building mafia doesn't allow for development without massive forms of corruption. I know of a contractor who refused to follow through with, because of a certain tender that he was meant to receive. He tendered for a particular project and someone else got it through a very nepotistic channel. And he decided, well, he legally held the right to this tender, and he was shot on sight. He was murdered on sight. And so there's so many of those stories of tenders being given out and damaged and retaken by those very same organizations, just purely because of the depth of corruption. This doesn't come through, obviously, in a book like this, but I'm aware of it. But I do give a sense just through the characters, and at the time, their emotional state, Razia's emotional state allows her to notice how the city decays, and I use that as a foil for what she's experiencing in the relationship, because she's in a car with a man humiliating her verbally, and she's noticing the decay of the city. So I kind of juxtapose her emotional space with what she's viewing of the city outside. So.
Can I have to just weigh in on that? For me, by not sort of going deep into the political the consequences of the bad politics of a place like KwaZulu-Natal and Durban, it almost, elevates us. Just one second. It elevates us, thank you, to the point that we are probably not the bad politics bad politics doesn't define society. And I think that while you can't be oblivious to the fact that the breakdown of the city, which is as evident as Durban, but not far off from Johannesburg in many ways. I think that distinction is also refreshing for me, someone who's very involved and engaged in the politics of the day.
No, I have to agree with what you're saying. My sister's family moved overseas a couple of months ago, and they were here in December. And the first thing I asked my teenage niece was, "What did you notice about Johannesburg?" Because she grew up here. And she said, "I noticed that the streets are so grubby." they've gone so grubby. And she was being an honest teenager. This is the first thing that she noticed. She loves the city. She misses the city. So we've noticed that, but we've sort of assimilated into our life what's happening around us, and we sort of drive past a pothole and we think, keep moving. And Durban is exactly that. If even Umhlanga has dilapidated over time. We're noticing the decay of the city, and we're wondering about management of city structures and what's been happening. So we want to reclaim our cities and refresh our cities, but it must engage a broader discussion around what's to be done.
Alright, so as we wrap up the conversation and as we get ready to buy many, many books, and Shafinaz will sign, I just want to say, Shafinaz, that sitting across from you today is a privilege that I don't take lightly. 10, 15, 12 years ago, I was a teenager and you saw something in me, and the confidence that you had in me, despite my many typos in my blog post, to give me that confidence to believe in myself that I could be a writer and that I could be a real writer, is something I don't take lightly. And I don't think you give yourself enough flowers for what your writing does for so many of us in terms of just showing what is possible. There's a young author that I've met along the way, and she has published, chicklet about lolium and romance, and she says, she's inspired by Gucci Girls, she's inspired by your writing, and that would have not been possible. This entire, Muslim, brown, South African chicklet genre would not be possible had you not done the pioneering work that you've done more than a decade and a half ago. So we really appreciate it, and I really echo the sentiment of the gentleman here that we hope we see a lot more books with Kwela. and I love that that so many people here tonight are vested in your success, that are driven by your writing or motivated by your writing, and more than anything, give us a little bit of joy as well. And so I really look forward to many, 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 many more books from you. And to say that, for the last decade I ran away from the fiction bug, but reading this book, it ignited that in me to say, maybe I need to go and visit some characters. Maybe I need to go to Durban for 5 weeks.
That would be fantastic. I would look forward to seeing what comes from you, because the idea of a Gucci Girl was just huge fun. We had fun reading, curating the material, putting the book together. It sold faster and quicker and larger than anything I've seen. And I think we sold 500 books in the first 2 days. And this was in 2015. We couldn't keep up with the hype at the time. But we had huge fun, and I think that's what it's about as well.
But I do think it's just that lesson in just taking a leap of faith, trying something new, and then also just showing that it can be done. And so many, I cannot tell you the amount of people. I still get stopped in Rosebank more. People asking, when is the next book coming out? I'm sure after Sophia, there was a lot of that people almost fall in love with your characters and want to know more about them. So, ladies and gentlemen, I sitting here today is a huge privilege to be part of this launch of Darlings of Durban, a novel by Shafinaz Hassan. Fantastically, if you're traveling soon, buy it, take it with you on your flight. If you want to have a leisurely Sunday afternoon before Ramadan, do it. This is the perfect weekend read. And I found myself questioning, why is so stereotypical Natasha? and why is so, doormat, giving doormat energy for Hannah? But it's wonderful, it's soulful, and really, really, really proud of this body of work and all of what you've done, Shafinaz, and really, 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 really inspired by this book, and I think the timing of it and what it means for so many people.
Thank you so much.